IOTA's main purpose is not simply to produce more essays for potential publication. It's to bring together theologians from parts of the world that have been separated by much more than geography. The atheist siege of so many historically Orthodox lands has affected a massive demographic shift in the flourishing of the church's life and theology. We're only beginning to appreciate its significance and to recover from it. I've participated in several international Orthodox theological gatherings since 1995, most of them in Eastern Europe. And in each of these I was struck both by all that we had in common, as well as what we experienced very differently as to the nature of the theological task, what theology is, how it's done, on what register of the human psyche it even takes place. Orthodox theology has always been a unity in diversity, but diversity is, for me, perhaps especially striking and challenging. Theologians from theological faculties in Eastern Europe are liable to experience the work of their colleagues in the US especially, and Western Europe to a different extent, as westernized, often as irreverent. Orthodox theology in the so-called diaspora addresses questions that are barely raised sometimes, or seen as less urgent in the East. Orthodox theologians in Western Europe are especially in the United States, are more likely to be influenced by critical theory, and as such are more open to questioning, for example, the historical reality of events and persons depicted in scriptural and hagiographic writings. These are just examples, really. Theologians in the West will often separate history from theology, and at the same time prioritize the concrete implications of theology. What I mean by that is best understood by reversing the perspective, because the theology emerging from Russia, Serbia, Romania, and to an extent also Greece can seem to Westerners as abstract and scholastic in its character, and also hesitant to critically analyze sacred texts. As to political priorities, here I'll be still more brief, and I'll only say that the kind of ethical and moral issues that seem to have the most urgency for many Orthodox in the US, abortion, homosexuality, war, especially specific wars, these play out very differently in the US, in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. As an American, I take note that the left-right spectrum, politically, is experienced differently in the U.S. Democrat-Republican landscape than anywhere else in the world. The nature of party politics, the effects of secularism, the extent to which we feel beholden to our respective governments, all of these have profound effects on our respective theological and socio-political output. The various ecclesiastical responses worldwide to conflicts in the Middle East, especially, are telling in this respect. Our theologies as Orthodox Christians are united by a great many features, and yet they remain widely diverse as to style and priorities. This, to me, seems to be the main significance of IOTA, is a step towards familiarizing ourselves with each other, with the diversity of Orthodox theological approaches, priorities, and languages. And we can only be enriched by this experience, especially if IOTA becomes a regular event, as it sounds positioned to do. I move on to discussing the theme of the group that I co-chair, together with Professor Michel Stavroux of the Institut Saint-Serge in Paris, Dogmatic Theology. Bulgakov begins his essential essay on this subject by saying, quote, "Dogmatic theology is the systematic setting out of dogmas." So dogmatic refers to the character of the teachings, and systematic refers to the method by which we look at them. Yet the moment one applies a systematic method to the exploration of church teachings, identifying ecclesiology, Mariology, pneumatology, eschatology, etc., the more one realizes that it's impossible to isolate them from each other. They're all independent and all founded ultimately, they're all interdependent. It's important. They're interdependent and all founded ultimately on the person of Jesus Christ. Just as Gregory, the theologian, St. Gregory of Nazianzus, famously exclaimed about the Trinity, "No sooner do I conceive of the one than I am illumined by the splendor of the three. No sooner do I distinguish them than I am carried back to the one." So it is with dogmatic or systematic theology. You separate your work into separate disciplines only owing to the limitations of human logic. And if you're doing it right, you immediately come back to Christ. And the moment you come back to Christ, you return to all that entails from the person of Christ to everything else, the church, the human person, death, etc. The upshot for IOTA is that dogmatic theology is an all-encompassing discipline. And the choice for the inaugural conference of our association is either to select one of the disciplines for our focused sessions, or to discuss issues and methodologies that shed light on the entire discipline. And so we propose to do some of each. We are co-planning 2 joint sessions, one with the Religion and Science group on creation and the ecological problem, and one with the Philosophy of Religion group on the doctrine of the Trinity. And then for our themed session, we're looking to explore questions relevant to the multiple sub-disciplines of dogmatic theology. And here I put, really, just for today, a placeholder. This isn't fixed in stone yet, but the role of Scripture in dogmatic theology.